Hi everyone. So we're going to spend the next 2 weeks just reviewing some basic math concepts. And this week is going to focus on fractions and decimals. So it should be relatively easy for everybody, as it should just be a review of things that you probably learned in high school, intermediate, or even in elementary. And so I'm going to start with fractions. So fractions is in chapter 1 of our e-text. And if you remember, your fraction has two main parts. You have a numerator, which would be your top number, and then your bottom number is called your denominator. Also, there are different types of fractions. So if your numerator is smaller than your denominator, we just call this a proper fraction. Okay, if we have your numerator that's greater than your denominator, this is an improper fraction. And then finally, if you have a whole number mixed in with a fraction, such as 1 1/4, this would be called a mixed number. And so the first exercise that we'll be doing is converting improper fractions, so where you have your numerator greater than your denominator, into either a whole or a mixed number. And so I really like this textbook because it gives you step-by-step instructions on how to complete certain things. So in this case here, there are 4 main steps to convert improper fractions to whole or mixed numbers. And so let's start off with the first example here. So let's say we have 11/8, also known as 11/8. So right now we have an improper fraction that we're going to convert to a mixed number. So step 1 tells us to divide the numerator by the denominator. And so when we write this out, when we do this by hand, okay, we have 11 divided by 8. And so if we were going to do this, 8 can go into 11 one time, and that's going to give me a remainder of 3. So step 2 says that the quotient is the whole number part of the mixed number. And so 11/8 is the same as, and I'm going to take the quotient, which is 1. That's going to be the whole number. Step 3 says the remainder is the numerator. So remember, remainder was 3. And then finally, number 4, or step 4, says the original denominator is the denominator of the fraction part. So 11/8 is the same as 1 3/8. Okay, and we can go the other way around. So we can convert mixed numbers into improper fractions. So let's say that we have 3 1/2 that we want to convert to an improper fraction. Okay, so step 1 is to multiply the denominator of the fraction part by the whole number. So I'm going to multiply 2 times 3, and then I'm going to add the numerator of the fraction. So 2 times 3 is 6, and then 6 plus 1 is 7. Okay, and then your denominator is going to be your same denominator. So that's 7/2. Okay, sometimes we'll need to convert fractions to lowest terms. And let's say we have 12/16. Step 1 tells us to divide both the numerator and the denominator by a common divisor greater than 1 to get to a reduced fraction. So we want to see what both of these numbers can be divided by. Okay, and so they're both divisible by 4. And so if we divide both by 4, my denominator will be 4, And then 12 divided by 4 is 3. So 12/16 is the same as 3/4. In other examples, you might need to raise fractions to higher terms. And so let's say that we have 3/4 and we want to convert this to a fraction where 24 is my denominator. So I just have to figure out what times 4 equals 24, and that happens to be 6. And whatever we do to your denominator, we also need to do to our numerator. So if we multiply our denominator by 6, we also need to multiply our numerator by 6. So 3 times 6 gives us 18. Okay, and 3/4 is the same as 18 over 24. Okay, sometimes we'll also encounter problems in which we need to add and subtract fractions. Okay, the easiest problems are those where we have the same denominator, also known as common denominators. And so let's say that we want to add 2 7/8 plus 4 3/8. All we need to do now is to add our whole numbers. So 2 plus 4 is 6. Because our denominators are the same, it stays at 8. And then we just need to add the 7 and the 3. This is going to give me 10. So 6 10/8. And so step 3 says, if necessary, change an improper fraction to a mixed number and mentally add any whole number parts. So right now we actually have an improper fraction because 10 is greater than 8. So what we want to do here is to convert this into a mixed number. Okay, and if you recall, to convert this to a mixed number, we'll do 8 and 10. 8 can go into 10 one time. That's going to give me a remainder of 2. And as a reminder, our whole number is going to be the quotient, which is 1. Okay, our numerator is going to be the remainder, which was 2. And then the denominator stays the same. And so this 6 10/8 is the same thing as 6 plus 1 2/8. So now if we add this together, 6 plus 1 2/8 is simply 7 2/8. Okay, we just have one more part to do, and it says to reduce the fraction part of the answer to lowest terms. So right now, we can divide both your numerator and your denominator by 2. And so that's going to give me 7 1/4. Okay, other times we might not have a common denominator. So let's say we have 5/6 and we also have 3/4. If you don't have a common denominator, we're going to have to raise it to higher terms. Okay, and so that's still part of step 1 where it says, if necessary, change the fraction parts to fractions with common denominators. Okay, and if you do this mentally, you'll know that 12 is a common denominator. Okay, and that's because we can multiply 6 by 2 to get 12. And so that means I'm going to have to multiply my numerator by 2. That gives me 10/12. And then for 3/4, you can multiply 4 3 times to get to 12. So I'll do that with my numerator as well. Okay, and now you can see we do have the same denominator of 12, and now we can add. So 10 plus 9 is 19. And whenever we're adding fractions, our denominator stays the same. Okay, and so step 3 says, if necessary, change an improper fraction. So right now this is improper because our numerator is greater than our denominator. So we're going to change that to a mixed number. And so let's see how many times 12 can go into 19. So that can go into 19 one time, and that will give me a remainder of 7. Okay, so this means that 19 over 12 as a mixed number is 1 and 7/12. Okay, sometimes we'll also need to subtract fractions. Okay, so let's start with an easy one where we have the same denominator. And let's say that we want to subtract 7/8 and 3/8. So as long as we have the same denominator, your denominator stays the same, and all we're doing is subtracting the numerators. So 7 minus 3 is 4, and then this can be reduced further, so they can both be divided by 4. And so that's going to give me 7 1/2. Okay, and so now let's take a look at a mixed number example. Okay, so let's say you have something like 5 3/4 minus 2 1/3. Just like we did earlier, we need to find your least common denominator. In this case, I'm going to use 12. Okay, so 4 times 3 is 12. So I'll multiply my numerator by 3 as well. Okay, and 3 times 4 is 12. So I'll also multiply my numerator by 4. That gives me 4. And 9 minus 4 is 5. And my denominator stays the same. Don't forget about your whole numbers though. So 5 minus 2 is 3. Okay, so 3 5/12 is your final answer. Okay, so there's one more problem that I'd like you to take a look at. And this is a bit harder than the regular subtraction. We're going to use something called borrowing. And in this example, I'm going to use 4 4/9 minus 1 5/6. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to find our least common denominator. And that happens to be 18. So 9 can be multiplied by 2 to get to 18. So we'll do the same thing to our numerator. 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, and 6 times 3 would give us 18. So we'll do the same thing for our numerator here. 5 times 3 is 15. Okay, so if we try to do this, we would get 8 minus 15, and we can't just do a negative 7 over 18. Okay, and so what we're going to do is to use the borrowing technique, and that comes into play in step number 2. So if necessary, borrow 1 from the whole number part of the minuend so that the fraction part of the minuend is at least as large as the fraction part of the subtrahend. So let's see how we would do this. So again, step 2 says if necessary, borrow 1 from the whole number part. So I'm going to concentrate on this 4 8/18. So remember, 4 4/9 is the same as 4 8/18. I want to borrow something from 4. So that leaves me with 3. And then I'm doing 18 over 18 because 3 plus 18 over 18 is the same thing as 4. Okay, because 18 over 18 is also equal to 1. So 3 plus 1 is 4. So now that I have this 3 and 18 over 18, I'm going to add this original fraction of 8/18. And then now if I add these together, 3 and 18/18 plus 8/18 is going to give me 3 as my whole number, 18 as my denominator, and then what I need to do now is to add 18 plus 8. That's going to give me 26. Okay, and I'm just going to delete this part here so I have a bit more space. Okay, so this part gets converted to 3 and 26/18. Okay, and we're keeping this as 15 over 18. Remember, we're still subtracting them. And so now that we have 26 minus 15, we'll get a positive number. 18 stays the same. And then 3 minus 1 is 2. So 2 and 11/18. Okay, finally, let's multiply fractions. And multiplying fractions are another easy thing to do. So let's say that we have 1 2/3 times 4/5. The first thing that we need to do is to change any mixed or whole numbers into improper fractions. So 1 2/3 is the same as, and this is going to be 3 times 1 plus 2. So 3 times 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5. So 5/3 times 4/5. Okay, when we're multiplying, you just multiply across. So 5 times 4 is 20. And then for my denominator, 3 times 5 is 15. Okay, and then finally, that brings us to step 4, which is to change the product to a proper fraction or mixed number in lowest terms. So right now it's an improper fraction. So let's convert this to a mixed number. They'll do 20 divided by 15. This gives me a remainder 5. So 20 over 15 is the same as 1 5/15. And I still need to reduce this to lower terms. So this becomes 1 1/3. Okay, sometimes we might have more than 2 numbers to multiply. So let's say that we have 2/3 times 4/5 times 5/6. All we need to do is to multiply all of our numerators and all of our denominators. So 2 times 4 is 8. 8 times 5 is 40. That's our numerator. For our denominator, 3 times 5 is 15. 15 times 6 is 90. Okay, and we can definitely reduce this to lower terms. Both can be divided by 10. And that will give me 4/9. Okay, and the final thing that we'll go over is the division of fractions. So it says to change any mixed or whole numbers to improper fractions. And we'll also invert the divisor. That is, change the numerator and the denominator. And then step 3, we're actually going to change the division symbol into multiplication. Okay, so let's see how this will be done. If we have 3/10 divided by 2/5, to make this easy, all we need to do, and I'm going to keep the first number, then I'm going to switch out my denominator and numerator. So that's 5/2. Okay, and step 3 says to change the division symbol into multiplication. So all I did was flip the numerator and denominator, and then I changed the division to multiplication. And then I'll do this the same way that I did it earlier. I'm multiplying straight across. 3 times 5 is 15, and then 10 times 2 is 20. Okay, both of these can be divided by 5. Okay, so that gives me 3/4. Okay, so this is it for this video, and it should help you as you do the few fraction problems that we have this week.